the next step is multi-track. The first next step is working through our respective teams at the diplomatic side, just to ensure that our diplomatic missions can function. There's been a series of reciprocal actions taken over the last 10 years that have really diminished our ability to operate in Moscow, as an example, and they would argue their ability to operate in Washington. We're going to need to have vibrant diplomatic missions that are able to function normally in order to be able to continue these conduits. The second is a high-level team, including those who are experts on these topics, the technical side, to begin to engage with their side on parameters of what an end to this conflict would look like. And on that front, obviously, there's going to be engagement and consultation with Ukraine, with our partners in Europe and others. But ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort, and so that process will begin. And then the third is, together with those other two, is beginning to engage in identifying the extraordinary opportunities that exist should this conflict come to a acceptable end, the credible opportunities that exist to partner with the Russians geopolitically on issues of common interest, and frankly economically on issues that hopefully will be good for the world and will also improve our relations in the long term between these two important countries. So all three of those efforts will be happening in conjunction with one another. Obviously, the diplomatic one is one we think we hope to move pretty quickly on, because this involves the treatment of our respective missions. The second one will be difficult, which is the question of Ukraine and the end of that conflict. But I think that's essential in order for the third piece to even be possible, which is our ability to work together on other geopolitical matters of common interest, and of course some pretty unique, potentially historic economic partnerships as well. The key that unlocks the door for those opportunities, however, is the end to this conflict. Yeah, again, I'm not going to negotiate or talk through every element of the disruptions that exist or have existed in our diplomatic relations and the mechanics of it. Suffice it to say that President Trump has pledged and intends to keep his promise to do everything he can to bring an end to this conflict. We cannot do that unless we have at least some normalcy in the way our diplomatic missions operate in Moscow and in Washington, D.C. And so we need to work to improve that, and we're going to work with them to see what's possible within that context.
Does that include removing Lavrov from rescinding sanctions that have been imposed?
We're just not at that level of conversation yet, but certainly that's there'll be a number of topics that will have to be discussed along the way. We haven't even begun that process. Today was just an agreement to begin a process to talk about those things.
All right. Thank you.
Agreements that we achieved. Number one, probably the most urgent one, and not the most difficult one, to ensure that ambassadors of Russia in America and America in Russia are assigned as soon as possible, and the obstacles that the Biden administration built for the last 4 years, obstacles in the way of our diplomatic missions, seriously hampering their work, sending out our diplomats, something that we had to respond to, seizures of our real estate and many other things, and bank transfers that are limited. So we have agreed that our deputies, as soon as possible, will agree on a meeting to look into the need to remove those artificial barriers and obstacles in the way of embassies and other establishments of Russia in America and of America in Russia, and to work systemically on removing them, to put an end to these difficulties that hamper the progress of our normal relationships. And today, at today's meeting, we explained and said that we noted very well that President Trump, in several of his speeches, the first among Western leaders, had said many times that drawing Ukraine into NATO is one of the main reasons of what is happening, that it's one of Biden's biggest mistakes. And had Trump been president back then, he wouldn't have let that happen. In this connection, we explained to our counterparts that President Putin had many times underscored that NATO expansion and Ukraine's entrance is a direct threat to the interests of the Russian Federation, a direct threat to our sovereignty. Well, to prevent any attempts to disrupt this resumption of relationships between Russia and US, we need to continue. And after this meeting, I can say that it's been quite a success. The conceptual approach to further steps, it was laid down by the presidents during their phone call, and we felt great attitude and willingness of our American counterparts to push this forward actively, and we're going to do the same. Thank you.